you go. That's right. Okay, we're holding on Daf Yidalit Amid Beis, Mantana de Layalef Sacher Sacher. Okay, how do we get into this? We're trying to figure out the source that a slave, an Eved Ivri, is acquired with money. So we had a source that an Eved Ivri that's sold to a non-Jew is acquired with money. We had a source that an Amma Ivriya is acquired with money. We had a source that Machru Bezdin, if the Bezdin sells him, is acquired with money. How do you know Meicher Atzmai? How do you know if someone sells himself as a slave? Went through this a whole bunch of there's 5 different types of possibilities in slaves. How do you know if someone sells himself as a slave? How do you know that he is acquired with money? So we said that there's a verbal analogy, sacher sacher. It says by when he sells him, when the court sells him because he stole, it says the word sacher. And over there it says that he's acquired with money. And it says sacher by when he sells himself as a slave. So even though it doesn't say that he's acquired with money, but sacher sacher teaches that to me. That's what we learned. Okay. Then we had one other discussion there, but let's skip that for now. So we thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. It's true. And this chus of our learning, we should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. Mantana, you see that's like in the middle of the page. Mantana d'layal sacher sacher. Who's the one that doesn't hold sacher sacher? When the Gemara said that if you learn sacher sacher, that means a verbal analogy because of the word sacher. That tells me sacher means that he's a laborer. That tells me that just like the one that said that the court sells is acquired with money, so too the one that sells himself into slavery is also acquired with money. Who's the one that does not say that? So hi Tanahu, it's this the following Tana. The Tanya was started in a brisa. Someone that sells himself. So a Jewish person that sells himself into slavery, he needs the money. So nimka l'sheish v'yasser al sheish. It could be sold for 6 years, or it can be sold for more than 6 years. If he needs more money, he sells himself for more years than 6 years. It's allowed to do that. Machru bezdin, but if the court sells him because he stole, eini nimka l'sheish. As that type of restitution that he has to make for the theft. So they only sell him for 6 years. That's the code of the court, that they can only sell for 6 years.
6 years at a time, or
I'm sorry?
6 years at a time until he gets
up to 6 years. I don't know. Maybe he goes out and then he gets sold again. Maybe I don't know. But this sale is only 6 years. We're doing this contrast. If he sells himself, he can't get his ear pierced. Where does this thing with the ear pierced and staying by this in slavery for 50 years? That's only machru bezdin is nirsa. That's only if the court sells him. If the court sells him into slavery, then he decides he wants to stay. He can stay for another 40 years, right? Until they. If he sells himself into slavery, in manikim like, excuse me, when he goes free, master is not required to give him gifts. What do they call this in English? When someone
the golden parachute.
That's funny. Levi says a golden parachute. What's it called when after someone like leaves a job, but they give him severance?
Severance. Yeah.
Severance. So, if someone, it doesn't happen. If someone is sells himself, he doesn't get severance when he leaves. But if the court sells him into slavery, he gets severance. He gets those gifts when it's way out. Machru best in manikim like. If he sells himself into slavery, the court does not. I'm sorry, not the court. The master does not give him a non-Jewish maid to live with. However, Machru Bezdin, if the court sold him into slavery, then the master is allowed to give him a non-Jewish maid to live with. That was the opinion of the Tanna Kama. So basically, we had 4 halachas. Go over that. Sold for 6 years only, gets the ear pierced, gets severance pay, and gets a shifcha kananis, a non-Jewish maidservant to live with. That would be only someone that was sold by the court. Someone that's not Jewish. He's a Jewish person that the court sold him into slavery. He ends up mating with this non-Jewish.
Okay. Years means he gets near. Even though he's Jewish.
So if he wants, he can stay for 50 years. That person, and he also gets severance pay, and he also gets the shifcha kananis. And if he doesn't do the earring, it's not an earring. It's a hole in the ear. It's not an earring.
Right.
So then he only goes. It's only 6 years. On the other hand, someone that sells himself into slavery, he could be sold for more than 6 years. He does not get his ear pierced. He cannot. He doesn't stay. Can't say that I'm going to stay longer, and get his. He could sell himself for longer in the first place. But to say that he wants to get his ear pierced to stay until 50 years, that doesn't work. He also doesn't get severance. And he also doesn't get the shifcha kananis. So there's 4 halachas where there's a difference between selling himself or being sold by the court. Rabbi Eliezer, not so clear if it's Rabbi Eliezer or Rabbi Lozer. Sending me to a Taisvis over here, but okay, whatever the case is. Rabbi Eli. No, I'm not up to the Vidachs yet. Rabbi Lezer says, Rabbi Lezer says, no, the halachas are exactly the same. Whether he sells himself for 6 years, whether he sells himself or whether he gets sold by the court. It's only 6 years. Basically, what Rabbi Eliezer does is he puts all of the halachas of being sold by the court and applies them also to sold himself. So the is only sold for 6 years. Both of them get their ear pierced. Both of them get severance. And the master can give him a non-Jewish slave maid to both of them. My love, is it not? You have exactly the machlekes that we're looking for. Tanna Kama lo yalef sacher sacher. Why does the Tanna Kama say that the halachas are so different between if he sells himself into slavery or if he's sold by the court? It's because they do not have the verbal analogy of sacher sacher.
Is it because they do not, or probably they do not? Is this the Havamina?
Yeah, it's the Havamina. Usually my loves, it ends up not being. Rabbi Lezer yalef sacher sacher, and Rabbi Lezer he does have the verbal analogy, and that's why according to Rabbi Lezer everything is the same. Where it says, Amar Rav Tevumi Mishmei Abaya. The name of Abaya, Rav Tevumi says the Kuli Alma Yalef Sacher Sacher. Actually, everyone has Sacher Sacher. Everyone has the verbal analogy. And they're arguing about a different pasuk. Okay, now what's going to happen in this Gemara is we're going to have really the halachas of Meicher Atzmai sells himself and Machru Bezdin and the court sells him should be exactly the same because there's a verbal analogy that compares them both. So why in these 4 cases is it not the same? Each one is going to have its own halacha that's going to make it separated from the other one. It's not one answer that divides them. It's each one. Each of these halachas have its own halacha, and each one has its own complexity that the Gemara is going to go through. And it's going to take us until the middle of the next page to finish this off. When we get to the next page, we're going to go back and we're going to say, I thought you said that someone doesn't hold of sacher sacher. Can we get back to that question? And we'll have to go back to that. But meanwhile, we're following. Everyone really holds of sacher sacher, of the verbal analogy, that selling himself is the same as selling the court being sold. The court selling himself into slavery is the same as the court selling him into slavery. So why do we have 4 differences? That each one has a separate reason. They're arguing about the following pasuk. My taima the Tanna Kama. What's the reason for the Tanna Kama? The Amar that they say that someone that sells himself into slavery could be sold for more than 6 years. Because it's miyat. How do you say miyat? It's excluded. It's excluded by the one that's sold by the court. Why? It says over there that he will serve you for 6 years. Now he will serve you. The he will serve you, which is implied by the avadcha. He will serve you. It means this person will serve you, and not by someone that sells himself. So we have a pasuk that excludes the person that sells himself from serving for 6 years, and that's how we know that he should serve for more than 6 years. Which means he can sell himself into slavery for 7, 8, 10, whatever he wants, or whatever any number. He can sell himself into slavery.
It looks like the one that the court sells has more benefits because they get severance pay. There's like a maximum of 6 years.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good. That's what it comes out. Hillel's pointing out that it looks like the one that the court sells has more benefit. Yeah. Why would you say that? Say that possibly, I mean, the logic that we'll see in the Gemara could be because we don't like when people sell themselves into slavery. This guy committed a crime, and the court sold him. We don't like when they commit crimes either. But the punishment was not his own doing. The punishment was what came from the court. We don't want people to sell themselves into slavery, so we don't give them too much.
Recidivism.
Any? Oh, is that right?
To the crime.
Oh, to go back to the crime.
Set them up properly.
That's interesting.
I would think that the person that if you're willingly trying to solve the issue, for example, like if you get into that.
I know, but Hashem says, "You're my servant. You're not a servant of anyone else."
Choosing that.
And when you're choosing to be a servant from someone else, that's already a violation. Okay, that's just a thought in there. Yeah, there's actually a Ramah somewhere that says you shouldn't sign a contract for more than 3 years or more than 5 years or something because it says that looks like you're, yeah.
Why do I have?
We need to use that for the mortgage.
30
years.
No, he didn't mean a contract like a loan or something of repayment. He meant you shouldn't sign a contract that of a employer-employee contract for more than 5 years or something, or more than 3 years. I forget what it says. You remember, Reb Naftali, what it says? 5 years or 3 years?
No, it's not 5. The question is it 2 or 3? It's shorter period.
Maybe it's okay. Maybe it's
In
3.
fact, I think he voids it if it is.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So on the other hand, there goes the job security. Right. What does the other one do? The other opinion, which is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. You see, what the Tanna commented over here is they said that it says Va'avadcha, and he will serve you. That means only the one that's sold by the court will serve you for 6 years. The other one that sells himself, he could serve you for even longer. What does Rabbi Eliezer say, who says that someone that sells himself is also only for 6 years? What does he do with the pasuk of Va'avadcha, and he will serve you? That's like excluding the other one, the other slave. It says Va'avadcha l'cha v'lei li'yeresh. Says that if the master dies, he will serve you, won't serve your inheritor. He's not emphasizing the he, he's emphasizing the you.
Says Allah.
Rabbi Lazar. Okay, I'll go with Rabbi Lazar as well.
Other than a son.
Other than a son? Is that what it says there? Yes, Rashi says. Yeah, very good. Rashi says, other than a son, it's based on the Gemara later. Okay. So he won't serve like the brother or the daughter. Okay. The idach. How does the Tanna Kama know that you don't serve the other relatives, the Jewish slave does? If he uses va'avadcha, he will serve you. To tell me that it's only this one that works for 6 years specifically. The other one could be more. So Tanakama says that it says Vavadcha twice. So then what does the other one do if it says Vavadcha twice? So then he should also know that it's only 6 years and not only 6 years for this one and not 6 years for that one. So the other time that it says Vavadcha, that he will serve you, it's coming to appease the master when he gives the severance pay. The pasuk goes in and says that you should give him the severance, and it shouldn't be difficult for you to give him the severance, give him the gifts when he's leaving, because he served you. Vavadcha, because he served you. So that Vavadcha is just coming to appease. Now the Gemara doesn't care to go back and say the other one doesn't say that that's necessary to say that you have to appease him, because maybe that could be a logical thing that he understood that on his own. Okay. Basically, what came out from this, Machlekes Tanakama and Rabbi Lazar, what we do with Avadcha. Tanakama says one Avadcha tells me that it's only if the Bezdin sells him, that it's 6 years, not if he sells himself. Other Avadcha tells me that he doesn't serve the other relatives. Rabbi Lazar says first Avadcha is the second Avadcha is telling me that the appeasement of the master, that he should give the severance pay. Okay, that was halacha number 1. That there's a difference, a contrast between if he sold himself into slavery or he gets sold by the court. Halacha number 2. My time at Tanakama Damar Meicharatz Mein and Nirtza. What's the reason for the Tanakama that says that someone that sells himself doesn't get his ear pierced? It's only the one that gets sold by the court that gets his ear pierced to work for another 50 years. What's the source for that? Since when the one that's sold by the court, the pasuk tells me, it says that the master will pierce his ear with a awl, right? And it says his ear, that means only his ear, but not the one that sells himself into slavery. His ear, but not the one that sells himself. So if that's the case, what does Rabbi Lazar say that says that even the one that sells himself into slavery also can stay for another 44 years to stay on with his ear pierced? Rabbi Lazar says that the word aznai is coming to teach me a gezeira shava, which is another verbal analogy. The Tanya was taught in a brayso Rabbi Eliezer Omer. It would be really nice if Rabbi Eliezer was Rabbi Eliezer. But if you want me to read it Rabbi Lazar, then I won't have that.
Someone who sells themselves, do they? I guess they stand to benefit the severance pay.
No, when they sell themselves into slavery, it's because they want money up front to pay for something or a debt or something, and they're selling themselves into slavery. Someone that's sold by the court is because he stole, gets caught, he doesn't have the money to pay back. The court as a punishment sells him into slavery to pay back the debt. Maybe he gets sold to the same person that he stole from, possibly. Work it off, or maybe it's not. Or maybe not. Maybe the guy doesn't want him.
About having these children.
With the maid.
One of the two is given slave to reproduce.
Right.
The kids belong to the owner.
Yeah.
That takes care of the reproduction of slaves. They don't have to trade in slaves. They reproduce themselves.
Right.
Is that made a big point of? Because in the South, what they did is they had special plantations just for reproduction.
Oh, really?
So they build the reproduction of slaves into the system.
Uh-huh.
That's on this coming page, your mom Delilah.
Yeah, it's coming up.
It's coming up.
I was listening. I walked the dog and didn't realize.
Okay. I have to catch up to Dr. Stein. Let's move. The Tanya was studying the brayso Rabbi Lazar says, how do you know that the piercing of the ear is done to the right ear, not to the left ear? I don't know. There's the whole thing, the right ear, the left ear, there's significance in that in modern.
Used to be.
Not anymore. So
I don't know, maybe now.
okay, and it says over here, it says the ear, and it says over there the ear. Over there? It says by the Mitzayra that they put the blood on his thumb and on his right ear. right, on his toe, the oil and the blood. So mala halan yamin, afkan yamin. So over here it means the right ear, because over there it says a verbal analogy. It comes along Rabbi Lazar and says, don't tell me that it's his ear and not the one that sells himself. The one that sells himself can also get his ear pierced. So why does it say his ear? It's coming to teach me that pasuk is used for a verbal analogy. The idach, what does the Tanakhama do? How do they know that it's the right ear? If they use it to teach me something else, imkain. Leimakra oizen. Let the pasuk just say ear. My oznai. What does it mean? His ear. Coming to teach me that it's only his ear and not the one that sells himself into slavery. So why, according to Rabbi Lazar, does it say his ear? Rabbi Lazar says I needed to say his ear because you should know that a Jewish maidservant girl is not allowed to get her ear pierced to stay for another 44 years in slavery. So it says oznai, his ear, as opposed to excluding the other gender, not her ear. The idach, how does the Tanakhama know that only his ear and not her ear? It says nafkale mevi'im yomer ha'eved b'layama. It says that if the slave, the pasuk says that if the slave should say that I love my master and my wife and I want to stay forever, it says if the slave says, not the slave girl. So they know it from there. So why does Rabbi Lezer need his ear and not her ear? If it already says ha'eved, that says vidach mi boile ad sheyemer kshueved. The other Rabbi Lezer says that we need im yomer ha'eved means he can only say it while he's still a slave. He can't go free and then say, you know what, I liked it back over there. Let me go get back into slavery. It's too late. Once he's free, he can't say that anymore. The idach. So how does the Tanakhama know that he can't say that anymore once he goes free? May eved ha'eved nafka. They learn because it says the slave, that definite article. The idach, Rabbi Lezer says eved ha'eved leidarish. He doesn't learn from the definite article. Yeah.
You mentioned his wife. Though he has a wife, won't be sold by the court. Right? If he finishes the term that the court tells him he wants to stay, would it take his wife?
What do you mean?
Because they would give him a wife when he was sold by the court.
Yeah.
But after he finishes
his term, he wants to stay longer, so he stays with the wife. Yeah, that's why part of his statement is, I want to stay because I like my wife.
The wife that they gave him?
It's like a bride.
Not talking about that.
He already has a wife.
Point.
Or
Because
they
if it
gave
was
him
a lady, I love my lady.
Wait, which
love my
wife is this? Is this his previous wife or the wife
They gave him.
The one that they gave him.
What if he had the wife before?
He has to have a wife before, or else they won't give him a new wife. They only someone that has a wife can get a second wife. Not better, but he wants to stay.
Does he still keep the first one?
The master needs to support his wife and family as well.
But she doesn't live there.
Yeah, maybe she does. I don't know. Yeah, yeah. It says you acquire a Jewish slave, you acquire a master.
Security had a good beginning.
Right. Okay. What happened over here is that we learned from the word oznai. And Tanakhama says it's only the one that's sold by the court, not the one that sells himself. He also learns from oznai that it needs to be oznai, that it needs to be the extra vav, that it's the right ear, right? And he also learns b'myaymar eved, that eved b'layama, that not the maidservant girl, she can't stay in. And he also learned from eved ha-eved. What was eved ha-eved according to them? That he needs still to be a slave in order to say this. And according to Rabbi Lazar, he uses Aizen as Xer Shava. Oznai teaches me and not her ear. And he has to say it in Yaimar Eved only while he's still an Eved. And he doesn't learn from Eved ha-Eved. He doesn't learn from the definite article. Okay, so we're up to the third halacha that would contrast, according to the Tanakhama, between someone that sells himself into slavery, called a Meicher Atzmai, versus Machru Besdin, versus someone that the court sells him. And that is regarding severance. My time at the Tanakhama, what's the reason for the Tanakhama that says someone that sells himself into slavery doesn't get severance. Because he's excluded. You with me, Ali? He's excluded by he's excluded by what the pasuk says regarding someone that's sold by the court. What does it say? It says Hanik Tanik Loi. You should surely give him gifts. Loi, you give it to him. It says Loi, him, and not to the guy that sells himself into slavery. So that's an exclusion because it's so particular that you give it to him means only to him, and not to someone that sells himself into slavery. By the way, there's a beautiful sikha the Rabbanis about if this applies to a regular worker, not a slave. It's a very interesting discussion because if it's only by Machru Bezdin and not to the one that someone that's sold by the court, not to someone that's sold by sells himself, then probably it shouldn't apply to anyone else because it's only by being sold by the court. And the Rebbe says no, it's a miyat by the Meicharatzmai. It's the chiddush over here is not that the Machru Bezdin gets Hanaka, gets the severance. The chiddush is that the one that sells himself does not get the severance. And based on that, he explains a few things, but basically that people should give severance if someone works. And then he says, the Rebbe says about teaching that you should give much more than what the students require. You should, to something like that. Anyway, okay. So v'idach, the other opinion that says that both of them get severance. What does he do with Lai? There was an exclusion. Severance pay.
They're being separate, so they get
severance pay. Severance pay.
Severance pay.
Okay, severance pay. V'idach, what does the other one say? That if he dies, if the slave dies, you don't give the severance pay to the inheritors. That's what it means. But of course, you give it also to the one that sells himself into slavery. It's only that the exclusion over there is that if he dies, you don't give it to the inheritors. Gemara says, why don't you give it to the inheritors? He's called a worker, just like if a worker dies. They have to pay it to the money is owed, goes to the estate, even though he wasn't paid. Shouldn't the severance pay go to the inheritors? So we reject this. We say that let's say Ruvain borrows money from Shimon. So Ruvain owes Shimon money. And then Shimon had borrowed money from Levi. So Shimon owes Levi money. So Ruvain, Levi could go over to Shimon to collect the money. And then Shimon says, just go to Ruvain, he owes me money. And Shimon could step out. And Levi now has a din Torah together with Ruvain. Right? And then they're actually considered litigants against each other in court. You can collect the money back from Ruvain. Not a shalish. This is a halacha from Reb Nassan. Reb Nassan Natana. B'maimid shlashton. It's maimid shlashton. Means that when they're all there, he can say, "You go to him." Anyway, what could happen here is that the payment is supposed to go to the slave, right? When he goes free, but he can't say the person that's claiming from the slave money doesn't go back to the owner, the master, to get the severance pay because of my mishlashtan. So that's what we're going to learn. He gives it to him, but he doesn't give it to the one that he owes money to. Because usually we paskin like Reb Nassan. The Tanya, it was taught in a brayso. Reb Nassan how do you know that someone borrows money from his friend? Mana bechaver, and his friend borrowed from his friend, or he's claiming from his friend, and his friend claims from his friend. How do you know that you take away from this one and you give it to that one? That means you skip the middle person. That you give it to the one that he was guilty to. And it doesn't say the one that he owes, it says one that he's guilty to, which means that you can go back to the first person. So we say asalai lafuke. So the loi by us, when it says hanik tanik loi, it's coming to tell me that he only give it to him and not to the third party. Okay. Well,
They do this like when you go to a restaurant and you can't pay your bill, you have to like work in the kitchen.
years ago, that's how it would work. But Shlomo Kalbach said,
We ever stuck there?
what do you do if you're in a coffee shop and you don't have money to pay for the coffee?
Yes, for another.
Yes, for another coffee.
Doing that.
I don't get it.
Because they don't give you the bill until.
Oh,
What do you do when you check into a hotel and they want you to pay your bill? You say, I'm staying another week. Another week goes by and you say, I'm staying another week.
Okay.
Maybe by then you'll.
By then they kick you out.
You're smart.
No, no, it's when it's a miracle.
Oh.
When someone calls you and says, "Oh, we offer you a job and we give you in advance."
Just waiting
It
for
would
Hashem to solve the problem.
calling on
Hashem
Hashem.
wants us to solve our own problems.
That's
We
the way the
can't.
stories go. Is it because?
We rejected that. He does give, we do give it to the widow or to the orphans, yeah.
Right. We give it to power. And the creditors.
Creditors, no, according to this.
If they claim their money from the.
That's a whole complication if they can claim. Depends what's a document in it with Okay, V'idach, what does the Tanakama say? How do they know that you don't give it to the third party? It says Ba'al Manami Le'Sril and Reb Nassim. They never hold like Reb Nassim. That was an easy way out. So there's no reason to tell us that you don't give it. You never give it to the third party. It's a machlekes. Okay. Now we're up to the fourth halacha, which is the maidservant, which we saw contrast according to the Tanakama, that only if sold by the court is a master allowed to give a non-Jewish slave girl to this person, to the slave to mate with. But if he sells himself into slavery, he doesn't get the non-Jewish slave girl. My time in Tanakama.
Is this Rav Nosson Abavli?
Yeah.
That's the only one that can.
Yeah, there is also a Reb Yonasan. There's also a Tana, and Reb Yonasan is possibly Reb Nassim. Some of the
Two
sages.
different ages. Yonasan ben Uzi?
No. He was much earlier.
Yeah.
There was a Reb Yonasan that debates with Reb Yoshia. And some commentators say that Reb Yonasan is really Reb Nassim. Yeah.
That's what's partial was when the Jew and the non-Jew.
What does it say, a Jew and a non-Jew? Yeah. Yeah, this is another example. Exactly. No. There is, but it's not so direct. It's obscure. The other one is with mamzeris. There's a leniency for a mamzer to marry a slave girl, and then to release the children that they should become free people, and then that way the children are cleansed from the mamzeris. Mamzer. No, when they're released, they automatically go free. They become Jewish. Yeah. That's a Reb Tarfon Allah. My time in Tanakama, what's the reason for that contrast? That someone that sells himself does not get the non-Jewish slave girl. Exactly like we said the whole time, because there's an exclusion from the one that's sold by the court. If his master gives him a wife, Lai gives him, and not to the one that sells himself. That's the way we've been doing this. We find the word Lai, and we say that it's to him. I mean, we say it's only to him and not to the other one. So what does Rabbi Lazar say? Now use your pencil for a second. The other one, Lai bal karchai. That's he can give it to him against his will, right? Because he's a slave. The master forces him to mate with this girl. V'idach, how does the Tanakama know that it's against his will? Mechi mishne schar sacher nafka. This is what Dr. Stein was telling us, because it says that he gives him the payment of a worker. And it goes like this. The Tanya was taught in a brisa. Ki mishna schar sacher avadcha. Sacher eina yovid ela bayom. Evidivri evid bein balayla. A Jewish slave works by day and by night. A regular worker only works by day. He works by day and by night. Is it going to really work by day and by night? But doesn't it say that he's supposed to be good with you? And that means that you're supposed to treat him very nicely. You're supposed to feed him the same food that you eat. You're supposed to give him the same drink that you drink. And it says even if you have 2 pillows, one a better one, and now you're supposed to give him the better one. So now you're telling me that he has to work by night while you're going to sleep? He does do work by night. What is the work that he does? He mates with the slave girl. So we learned from there that Mishnah Schar Sacher, it means like a double payment. That he gets also the payment he's getting also because of his work by night, which is. That's how we know that the master can force him to mate with this girl. That's how the Tanakama would know that. V'idach, what does Rebbe Lezer do with Mishnah Sar Sacher? If it would only say Mishnah Sar Sacher, then I would have thought that doesn't tell me that it's against his will. That could mean only if he agrees. But against his will, maybe not. So Kamash Blunt, so that's why it tells me that he can give it to him against his will. Okay. Back to our original question. We say, Alaman Tanat Layalef Sacher Sacher. So who's the one that doesn't say Sacher Sacher? That's how we started the Gemara today. Who's the one that doesn't say that we have a verbal analogy that compares someone that sells himself into slavery to someone that is sold by the court? Who is the one that doesn't have that? And according to them, I don't have a source that a eved is acquired with money, because I know that someone that's sold by the court is acquired with money, but I don't have the source for someone that sells himself, because he doesn't learn sacher sacher. He doesn't learn. And the Gemara had to answer that we learn it from the Chisisku, that he learns it from another source. But who is this one that says that doesn't have that? So Haitana, we give another suggestion. Tanya was taught in the Brisa of Shavel Mishpachte. It says when the Yovel comes, the Jubilee comes, the one that sold himself into slavery returns to his family, which assumed to mean that even if there's no 6 years there, usually it's 6 years, or possibly more, right? But at the Yovel, he returns to his family. Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says, "Bama kasim medaber." What are we talking about? Iba meichras. If we're talking about the person that sold himself as a slave, Hari kvar amar. We already said someone that sells himself to a slave. It says ad shnasa yovel. It says that he works until the yovel. What does it mean over here that he returns to his family? Ibn Yertza, if it's someone that had his ear pierced and he's staying until 50 years and he goes free at the yovel. Hari kvar amar. It already says avavad eloilam, that he works for until Lailam, which we assume those 50 years to the Yovel. It must be talking about that the Bezdin sold him 2 or 3 years before the Yovel. So Yovel might see that he doesn't wait until the 6th year, but actually he goes free by the Yovel, even after 2 or 3 years. And if there would be a comparison between someone that's sold by the court and someone that's sold by someone that sells himself, lamali. So why do I need to say that he goes free by the yovel? Neilef sacher sacher. I would automatically know that if the one that sells himself goes free by yovel, also the one that's sold by the court goes free by yovel. I won't need the whole pasuk. It must mean that Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov does not have the verbal analogy of sacher sacher, and that's why he needs a special source to say that the one that's sold by the court goes free at the yovel. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says, "Lo'ilam yalef sacher sacher." No. He actually holds of sacher sacher. And nevertheless, we still need the pasuk, exactly what we did in the last Gemara, where we say, no, really, he learns that everything is the same. It's just over here that it was different, and that's why we didn't have sacher sacher over here. Because it could have entered in your mind to say, the one that sells himself, he didn't. Why is he a slave? He didn't commit any crime. He needed the money. Okay. So therefore, we let him go free. But someone that's sold by the court, why is he being sold by the court? because he stole. And so, maybe we should say that if the Yovel shows up, I'm not following why the Yovel is not in the calculation, why they didn't get it. I thought they would have known that the Yovel's coming since 48 years ago. They would know when the Yovel's coming. But why would we say that when the Yovel shows up on the 50th year, that we shouldn't let him go? Maybe we shouldn't let him go free because he needs to do his time. He needs to get 6 years in there, and we should keep him until the 6th year, no matter what. Kamash Malan, so it comes to teach us that even though it says Sachar Sachar, but I could have thought this would be different. Okay, Amar Mar.
How do we know there's someone who holds? We don't know.
The Gemara before said, "Hani chalaman di'alef Sachar Sachar, chalaman di'alef Sachar Sachar ma'ikol meimar." And then the Gemara says, "Mantana di'alef." Like, where did you get that from? The Gemara is asking you a question. How do you know that there's such a thing? The Gemara mentioned that there's such a thing, and we don't know where they got that from. Yeah. Right?
Gemara mentioning that just to introduce that new ideas.
I'm sorry?
Gemara mentioning that just to introduce new ideas.
Oh, yeah, that could
Throw
be.
in a couple pages.
That could be. Keep the conversation going.
He said they didn't calculate that he's going to be released in 2 years before the Jubilee sale.
That's what it looks like. The way that the way they're presenting the story is that the Bezdin sold him 2 years before the Yovel. Now we say, oh, what do you know? The Yovel goes free.
He paid me back the cost of the refrigerator.
Right.
So that doesn't that
I think they would
incentivize
they would pay
before?
it back immediately.
Yeah, for the first 2 years of his work.
No, right at the sale, all the money would go to the person then, and then he would have to work it off. So that's now all of a sudden he goes free. Oh, look, he goes free. But 1 second, but he committed a crime. He should have to stay there for longer.
If the value of the sale is more than the cost of the item sold, is open escrow?
I don't know. I mean,
Does it get applied against the sale price?
I don't know. Those are good questions.
So there'd be a lot of favor right before the Yovel. Release.
Let me just see if I can finish. I'm looking if I should rush through this or. Let's try to get to the bottom of the page. Ella. Amar Mar, the master if it's talking about someone that his ear was pierced, we already said that he goes free. Mahi, what are you talking about that you said someone that's ears pierced goes free at the Yovel? The Tanya was taught in a Brisa. By then the Yovel comes, man turns into his inheritance, he returns to his family. What are you talking about? If we're talking about someone that sold himself for Ikvar Amr, we know he returns to his family because we said by us, right? If it's Ibn Bezdin, if it's someone that's sold by the court, Ikvar Amr, we already said that. The Machru Bezdin was the B'Shavel Mishpachti. Meicher Atzmai was Achnas Yovel. Must be talking about someone that his ear was pierced. 2-3 years before the Yovel, that he goes free anyway. How do you get that? From B'Shavte Mishal Chuzasi V'Sham Mishpachti that we're talking about a Nirtza. Amar Rava Bar Shila Amar Kra Ish. It says V'Shavtem Ish. The man goes back. What applies to a man but not to a woman? Must be talking about the piercing of the ear. Only the man can do that. It needs to write both. Someone that was sold by the court and also someone that his ears was pierced. If it's only someone that was sold by the court, I would have thought that why does he go free? You shouldn't give him a knas. That he should stay for 6 years. He didn't ask to stay longer than what was required. Aval Nirtza the Mati's money, but the one that his ear was pierced, he asked to stay longer. Maybe we should give him a fine because why are you trying to stay longer as a slave? That's not a good thing. You're supposed to serve Hashem, not serve a human being. Yeshmin and Nirtza, and if it would say only the Nirtza, because he already finished the 6 years. But someone that's sold by the court, he never did his 6 years yet. Maybe he shouldn't go free. So I would say no. So tzricha, that's why he needs to tell me that he goes free by the yovel, even without the 6 years. Vitzrach lemichtav v'shavtim, vitzrach lemichtav laylam. He needs to write both, that he returns, and also has to write that he serves for 50 years. Because of Rachman laylam, if it would have said that he serves for 50 laylam, which means forever, which we translate as 50 years, hava mina laylam mamish, I could have thought it really means forever. Because Rachman v'shavtim says that he returns, that means that it's only 50 years. Because Rachman v'shavtim would only say that it returns after 50 years. I could have thought only someone that didn't work for 6 years, he goes free by yovel. But if he worked for 6 years already, and he wants to stay longer, I shouldn't say that he has to stay for 44 years. I would say well, the first one was 6 years. The second one will be 6 years. He's going to work a total of 12 years. It has to tell me that he works forever, which is 50 years. That forever is just the yovel. Okay, let's leave it over here.
It says, which mitzvah is only for